laundry.
Oh, okay.
She opened laundries, hand laundries.
I see.
And then she would build up the business, and then she would sell it, and then
Start another
open
one.
another laundry.
This is your mother's mother.
My Nana, who would be my Irish grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And Old Keys worked for her, and when she closed her last laundry, Old Keys had no place to go. She actually lived in a room behind the laundry.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother took Old Keys.
I remember you telling me quite often as a kid that Old Keys actually saw Abraham Lincoln.
Yes, she did.
All right, tell me that story.
Well, she was American born.
Okay.
But she lived on the east side, like a lot of the Irish did at that time.
Right.
And she said her father took her to a parade, and she sat up on his shoulders and saw Abraham Lincoln with his high hat, tipping his hat to everybody driving along Broadway.
Oh, so it was in New York City where she
yes.
saw him.
Oh,
Okay.
New York City.
All right.
She was born and bred in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And she also remembers the parades. I guess it was the St. Patrick's Day parade. I don't think it was called that then.
Mm-hmm.
But she had a lot of brothers, younger brothers, and she was told not to go to the parade. And I guess her father and her brothers went to the parade.
Mm-hmm.
And she sneaked out. And she was wearing an orange dress.
Oh, so it was the Protestant dress.
Yes, and she went to the parade.
Mm-hmm.
And she said some strange man just grabbed her off the street and asked her where she lived and took her home. Now, of course, when she told me that story, I didn't know what the orange...
The significance of wearing an orange to a Catholic, Irish
yeah,
Catholic
right.
parade would
But
be.
she said she was told not to go to the parade.
Right.
Now, maybe the orange dress, they were very poor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the orange dress was her best dress.
Right.
But her father wouldn't let her go to the parade.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me about them. Her father was a roofer, and he had gotten a nail in his foot, and it was very, the whole foot was festered, and, and I guess that was the time during the Civil War when they were forcing the Irish to go into the army.
Oh, when conscription, when
said,
the draft
said,
was instituted.
She told me the soldiers came to her house, and they wouldn't believe her father. They thought he was making believe, and they made him walk up and down to prove
that he had a game.
that
his foot was messed up. I
Otherwise, they would have taken him into the army. I think they did that with the Irish.
Oh yeah.
They just scooped them up, and they had no. It wasn't like some rich people could pay to have someone go into the army for them.
Right.
But the Irish, they didn't get anything. They just went in. But I remember her saying that.
Now, Old Keys must have been pretty old.
Well, we always called her Old Keys. Actually, she was probably in her late 60s.
Right.
Keys could read, and she could write her name, but she couldn't. She was. I would say she was almost illiterate.
Illiterate.
Yeah. And Old Keys was afraid of anything. She was afraid to answer the telephone. And she was also thought the radio, the people on the radio lived downstairs in the cellar.
Oh, okay.
And she would never let us turn off the radio because we would insult them. So we'd have to wait until there was a break and then we'd turn the radio
So
off.
she was uncomfortable with technology.
Oh, very uncomfortable.
Okay. All right.
She was scared to death of it. And Keys used to see things.
Ah.
She would, now maybe she had Alzheimer's, maybe it was early
Stage.
Alzheimer's, but she used to see people and trees and things like that.
This is a woman that took care of you when your parents weren't home.
Oh, but she was very, very sweet and very
I'm sure.
lovable, but she just had these little idiosyncrasies. And Keys, she didn't do a lot. She washed the dishes and made the beds, and But Nana did all the heavy cleaning.
Right.
Because she
That-
never did any of the heavy cleaning.
So she was more like a family friend that I'm sure your mother grew up with, knowing her.
Well, my
and,
mother knew her.
Right, and you guys kind of took her in as sort
in
of
the-
an employment slash.
Right.
She has nowhere else to go.
She had
sort of.
nowhere else to go.
Now, did she live with you till she died?
No, when we graduated from high school, and there was nobody coming home for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
We got worried about old Keys because old Keys would put the kettle on, and the kettle would she'd fall asleep, and the kettle would boil over.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, Keys was in her 80s.
Right.
It would boil over. It would put the gas out.
And then you get the gas fumes.
Well, we had a couple of dead birds
Oh.
from the Nana's canaries. A couple of them just died
Mm-hmm.
because of the gas.
Right.
And there was one time we came home for lunch. We came home from lunch all through high school, grammar school and high school.
Mm-hmm.
Always came home for lunch. And Keys was asleep, but she was really more than asleep. And we got Keys out on the porch. Her name was Rebecca Keys, by the way,
Oh, I see.
but we called her Keys.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't, well, when you're little, Rebecca is a very hard
mouthful.
name.
Mhm.
Keys was very easy to say. So that when we went into high school, when we went in first year of high school, we moved to an apartment on 131 Silver Lake Road.
Mhm.
We lived on Ridgewood Place back then.
Right, that's where you spent most of your childhood.
On
was
Ridgewood Place,
right?
yes.
Near Silver Lake.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So Keys did
we
Keys
put
finally
in a
wind up
nursing.
in a
She was in a
home?
nursing home.
Mhm.
Yeah. And Keys lived into her 90s.
Hmm.
She lived into her 90s.
Good long life.
Good long life.
Mm-hmm.
But she'd just look out, and I don't know, maybe her eyes were going good, because she never read, so you didn't know whether her eyes were, she didn't read anything.
Mm-hmm.
So she would see things, and we, of course, we thought it was very fun.
Mm-hmm.
We
Oh,
thought-
I'm sure.
We thought it was very fun.
I'm sure. Okay, let's spend a couple of minutes talking about the Dempsey side of the family now. They came over from Ireland like
I got-
1840s or something,
yeah,
or 18
I think
before the Civil War, before the
Civil
famine.
War. Yeah, I think so.
All right, and they built that house.
They built the house.
Now, is that Daddy's grandfather that built the
That
house,
was
or his
his-
great?
No, I guess his grandfather, Malloy, or it could have been his great-grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know.
Okay.
Because his grandfather.
Oh, so that was
dead.
the Malloy house, not the
That was
Dempsey
the
house.
Malloy house.
Oh.
The Dempsey house was up on Fallbrook Street
I
where
see.
Anna lived. That was the Dempsey house.
Now I get it.
And when the Dempseys came, I don't
Who
know.
knows? Now,
But
what did Daddy's grandfather do for a living? Do you know?
I think, no, I don't know. I think they were both miners.
Oh, his father and grandfather?
Not
No.
his father.
Okay, his
Both
grandfather.
of his grandfathers.
I see, the
I
Malloy.
think were miners.
Okay, coal miners.
Coal miners,
Okay.
right.
And he lived to be a ripe old age, didn't he?
Well, no, not Grandpa Malloy. I don't know how old he was when he died, but he was not nearly as old as Grandpa Dempsey.
Right.
He lived well into his 90s.
Okay.
And put a roof on his house when he was 90.
Did he really?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. And he was married to a McDonald. I met both of them.
Okay.
She was kind of a shrew.
Mm-hmm.
She'd been a school teacher and she taught all the politicians in town. She taught them. And if anything went wrong,
Oh, she knew who to yell at.
oh yes, she'd call them up
Oh, would she?
and tell them to get up here immediately,
Mhm.
and they'd come. And they were scared to death of
Oh, really?
it. Yeah, and Mrs. What was her name? The family in good counsel that came from. Grandma Dempsey used to yell at the girls if their skirts were too short or they had too much makeup on. You know that family in very pretty family in good counsel. And the mother lived across the street
Oh, really? She was
From-
in Carbondale?
from great grandma Dempsey.
Oh, I
Oh
see.
yes,
All
they were
right.
an Italian family.
And she was a really...
The Elias.
Yeah, that name sounds
And
familiar.
they were in good care. All very pretty.
Yes.
Very pretty children.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived across the street
Mm-hmm.
from. I think Fallbrook Street originally was mostly Irish, but then after the Irish, the Italian miners came in.
Mhm.
The Irish went to the railroads
I see. And
because
that's
your grandfather.
right. That Daddy's father was a railroad what?
Conductor.
Conductor. Okay.
Conductor, yes. And he had the route from, I guess, Carbondale to Binghamton.
Mm-hmm.
And Grandma Dempsey told me that he had a very bad cold, very bad cold, probably flu or something like that. And the caller, in those days, the caller used to just come around and knock on the door. And I mean, I don't think they had a schedule like, printed and all of
Mhm.
that. The caller would come around and knock on the door.
On the passenger doors of the trains, you mean?
No, knock on the door of the house
Oh.
to tell them that they had to go out on a run.
Oh, I see.
They called it a caller.
Mm-hmm.
And she said he went out, but he had a terrible cold. And he's 26 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And he got pneumonia and died. In those days, you got pneumonia, and, it was touchy whether you lived or died.
Mhm.
They had nothing.
No antibiotics or anything
nothing,
like that.
nothing,
Right.
nothing. If the fever broke, you lived.
Mhm.
Because that's the same way with Dodo. She had pneumonia when she was a little girl.
Oh, okay.
And it was touch and go.
Mm-hmm.
But the fever broke.
Mhm.
The way, they explain it to you. It's not the way the doctors would explain it to you now.
Right. Right. Okay.
But that's what I remember. And your grandfather's name was Francis, and he had two brothers, Lenny and Eddie. And Lenny was the barber, the town barber. And Eddie was a kind of a traveling salesman,
Mm-hmm.
sort of kind of guy, as was his son, who was your father's first cousin. And some say, I never met him, but some say he looked a great deal like your father. But of course your father said he was better looking,
Mm-hmm.
naturally.
Of course.
He thought he was much better.
So
And
after,
then
go
They
ahead.
had
I'm
a
sorry.
sister Anna,
Mm-hmm.
and a sister, Sister Consuelo's mother. I can't remember her name now. So they had their 4 children. And that's pretty much Grandma Dempsey, your great-grandmother. She kind of henpecked her husband. His
Mhm.
name was Edward. And he liked to go down and hang out at the firehouse and have a couple of beers, But she used to scold him when he came home. In fact, I was there once when he came home, and she scolded him. But it was funny. She died, and after she died, he kind of went to bed. He never. I guess he missed being scolded.
Mm-hmm.
You would think he would say, "Oh boy, finally I can go down to the firehouse and hang out, and I won't be yelled at." But he didn't. He just he sort of gave up after she died.
Mm-hmm.
He missed it. He missed the scolding. But I didn't know them. I met them on a couple of occasions,
Right,
but I
right.
didn't know. But you've met Aunt Anna, and you've met Sister Consuelo.
Mm-hmm.
See, I was trying to think of Consuelo, Sister Consuelo's name, a mother's name. They came from Meadville, Pennsylvania, where Pete Pless is practicing now.
Oh,
in
really?
Meadville. But I don't think there are any of the Quinns left in Meadville now. But